This girl had everything, yet she turned her back on her own family over a damn last name. Watch till the end to see why she walked away. Comment 1, if you understand her. 2, if you think she went too far. I was born with a whisper, not a welcome. No pink balloons, no father's embrace, just silence, and the faint scent of antiseptic and resignation. My first cry was met not with joy, but a pause. The kind of pause that slices through the air, sharper than any scream. My earliest memory wasn't of a toy or a lullaby. It was the sound of Brandon laughing, wild and free, while I sat on the hardwood floor, watching from a distance, as if joy was reserved for someone else. I was 5 when Mom told me, "If you had been a boy, your father might have smiled." She said it without cruelty, just as a fact, like reading a weather forecast. Tuesday, mostly cloudy. You, mostly disappointing. Our house in that quiet Pennsylvania town never really breathed. It creaked, it sighed, but it didn't breathe. The wallpaper curled at the corners like it too wanted to escape. And the air always felt heavy, as if filled with words no one dared say. It was a late autumn evening when the vase broke. I remember the crack. Not the sound, but the way the air changed after. Brandon had been racing through the hallway, his sneakers thudding like little hammers on the floorboards. I saw it all. The slip, the elbow, the cascade of glass and porcelain. But when Dad came storming in, Brandon already had his hands shoved in his pockets and a look of innocence practiced to perfection. "Hailey," Dad barked. "What did you do?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words wouldn't come. I looked at Brandon and he smiled. Not a cruel smile, just confident. He knew how this played out. He always did. "You're grounded, and clean this up." I swept up the shards while Brandon wandered off to play with his plastic dinosaurs. I think that was the first time I noticed how often injustice wore a familiar face. Later that night, Mom found me by the radiator, the warmest place in our entire house. I was clutching one of Brandon's broken toys, trying to fix it. I didn't know why. Maybe I thought if I could fix things, they'd love me more. She knelt down beside me and said, "Girls should be quiet." That sentence clung to me like static. I remember blinking at her, unsure if I'd heard right. She didn't clarify. She just stood up and walked away. It was Grandma who saved me that winter. Not from the cold, but from drowning in silence. On Christmas morning, after Brandon had opened a tower of presents and I'd unwrapped my single book, she pressed a small object into my palm. A little blue diary, soft and worn like it had lived a life before me. "Write it down," she whispered. "It'll ease the pain." Her hands were warm. She smelled like cinnamon and mothballs. I wanted to hug her, but Dad called her back into the kitchen and the moment vanished. That night, when everyone else slept, I lay curled under my blanket, diary pressed to my chest like it could protect me from the sharpness of being unwanted. That's when I heard them. My parents' bedroom was down the hall, but old houses have thin walls and long memories. "If it weren't for your mother forcing me, I wouldn't have kept this little girl." Dad's voice. Clear, cold, final. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and listened as the wind outside clawed at the window panes like it wanted in. The word, "kept," hit me harder than any punishment. I wasn't raised. I was kept. Some children sleep with stuffed animals. I slept with that sentence. And somewhere between night and morning, with my small fists clenched under the blanket, I whispered the words that would carry me through the next decade like armor. If a son is what Dad wants, then I won't need Dad. Brandon's mistakes became jokes. Mine became character flaws. In our house, there were no rules, only exceptions. And all of them belonged to my brother. He didn't just walk through life. He glided with the wind behind him and applause waiting around every corner. At 16, Brandon was charming, clever enough to impress without effort, and handsome in the kind of way that made teachers forgive missing assignments with a laugh. I was 14 and invisible. My words were always too sharp or too soft, my eyes too questioning, my presence too much. It started small. A history project. I'd spent 2 weeks working on it. Late nights, dusty books from the local library, printing photos at the town drugstore with my own allowance. I rehearsed every sentence until my voice sounded like someone else's. Then Brandon waltzed into the living room the night before the presentation, holding my trifold board in one hand. "This is good," he said casually. "Mind if I borrow it?" I stared at him. "It's not for sharing. It's mine." He shrugged. "Relax, Hailey. We're family. What's yours is mine." The next morning, he walked into school early, smiling, confident. By the time I arrived, he'd already presented my facts, my graphics, even my personal commentary about the role of propaganda in wartime. "Excellent work, Brandon," said Ms. Jeffries, our history teacher. "You've really matured." I froze in the hallway, my hands clenched around the straps of my backpack. My voice caught in my throat. When I confronted him at lunch, he just leaned in and whispered with that same amused smirk, "You're good if you know how to be quiet." When I told Dad, he didn't ask for proof or question Brandon. He just looked up from his newspaper and sighed. "Don't hurt your brother over something so petty." Petty. That word wrapped itself around my ribs. Brandon sauntered into the kitchen moments later and draped an arm over my shoulder like we were buddies. "Come on, Hailey. Let's not make everything a tragedy." That was the thing about Brandon. He didn't destroy with fists. He corroded with charm. Later that week, an announcement came over the school intercom. "Congratulations to Brandon Morgan for being selected as this year's regional scholarship delegate." I stopped walking. The hallway around me blurred. That scholarship had been my goal since 7th grade. I'd submitted every essay, aced every requirement. But Brandon's name held more weight, more sparkle. That night at dinner, Dad raised a glass. To my son, the heir, making the Morgans proud. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I excused myself early. My appetite was gone. In my bedroom, I pulled out the old diary Grandma had given me. The corners were frayed now, some pages stuck together from years of neglect. But the ink inside was still bold, still angry. I flipped to a blank page, the silence around me thick and familiar. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, "If I don't have a voice, I'll write my voice in the future." Then I kept writing. I wrote about the scholarship, about the project, about Dad's toast and Brandon's smirk, about how one day someone would read these pages and understand that silence doesn't mean consent. It means planning. Grandma once told me, "Be careful with the child who has never been told no." Brandon had never heard no, but I had, too many times. And now I was beginning to turn each of those no's into something sharp, something patient, something mine. They made sure I knew I was nothing, until a college thought I was something. The letter came on a Tuesday. Thick envelope, gold crest in the corner, the kind of thing people frame and hang in offices decades later. I didn't open it in front of anyone. I took it to the attic, my attic, and peeled it open with shaking fingers. Full scholarship. 4 years, creative writing, across the country. My breath caught in my chest. Not because I didn't believe it, because I finally had proof that someone else did. Someone who didn't share my blood had looked at my words and said, "Yes, you matter." I waited until dinner to say anything. The table was its usual quiet war zone. Forks clinking, eyes darting but never meeting. Brandon slumped in his chair, scrolling on his phone. "I got in," I said, "and they're paying for everything." Mom barely paused. "Well," she said, placing her knife down with deliberate control. "You're a writer, not a doctor." Dad didn't even look up. He muttered something about liberal arts trash and reached for the salt. Brandon chuckled. "What's the point of a girl studying so hard anyway?" There it was again. That quiet corrosion, like acid behind a smile. I didn't respond. I just folded my napkin slowly, focusing on the corners. I'd spent 17 years in this house. I knew the walls better than my own skin. And suddenly, all of it felt so small. Later that night, Grandma came to my room. She didn't knock. She never did. She just appeared in the doorway like some gentle ghost, holding a worn envelope. "It's not much," she whispered. "Just a little I saved from my sewing work. Bus fare, first rent, a real coat, whatever buys you a little freedom." My throat tightened. "Thank you." She pressed the envelope into my hand. Her eyes, cloudy with age, still held something fierce. "Don't come back if you're not ready," she said. "They'll swallow you again, and you're too close to flying." The next day, I sat through another cold meal. No one asked about the school. No one even said the word congratulations. So I stood. The chair scraped loudly against the tile. Everyone looked up, finally. "I don't need anyone in this house to acknowledge me anymore," I said. The room held its breath. Then I walked away. No slamming doors, no screaming matches, just the quiet finality of someone done waiting to be seen. That night, I packed in silence. One suitcase, one duffel, the diary, Grandma's envelope, a copy of a novel I loved. In the morning, I slipped out before the sun had fully risen. The house was still, windows drawn shut like eyes refusing to witness. No one came to the porch. No one called my name. I closed the gate behind me, and I didn't look back. San Diego didn't know me. That was the best part. No one here had seen me scrub dried spaghetti off the kitchen floor while Brandon got praised for microwaving a frozen pizza. No one remembered how my father once introduced me as his quiet one, while grinning at my brother like he was the sunrise. The city didn't care about my last name. I stepped off the campus shuttle that first morning, the sun casting a golden net over the sidewalks. Palms swayed like they were waving hello. The ocean wasn't a postcard anymore. It was salt in the air, a whisper in your lungs. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to survive. I met Lena in an art history seminar of all places. She wore headphones and denim jackets embroidered with vines and strange birds. She had the same last name as mine, Morgan, but she wore it like a borrowed coat. When I mentioned it, she just blinked. "Yeah," she said, tugging at a loose thread. "Same family tree. I was the leaf they tried to snip." We didn't talk about it again, but there was something comforting in her presence, like finding out someone else had been thrown from the same burning house. Ryan, on the other hand, entered my life with a coffee stain and a misplaced notebook. "I think this is yours," he said, holding out my binder after a writing club meeting. His sleeves were rolled up, his fingers ink-smudged. "Thanks," I muttered, pulling it close like armor. "I read your piece," he added, hesitating. "The one about the attic." My heart stuttered. "You did?" He nodded. "It wasn't just good. It hurt. In the best way." It was the first time someone said my pain had value, that it translated, that it reached. 2 weeks later, the club president announced that my essay, Inheritance of Silence, had been nominated for a regional award. I didn't hear the applause. I was too busy staring at the floor where my old life felt like dust I could finally step over. Ryan walked me out afterward. "So, real question," he said, half joking. "You gonna keep the last name Morgan when you publish?" The question felt simple, but it landed like a flare in a dark forest. Lena had once told me they hated I chose to draw. Said it was useless, but art saved me. What's useless to them is often what saves us. That night, I sat in the dorm window with the diary open on my lap. I flipped through pages of inked rage and half-dried tears, Grandma's pressed flowers, receipts from solo bus rides. My fingers paused on a line I'd written years ago. "If I don't have a voice, I'll write my voice in the future." This was the future. Ryan's question echoed. Was I going to carry that name? Was I going to let every byline be a reminder of the people who made me disappear in my own house? Number I would write something new. For me, For the girl in the attic. For the silence that taught me how to scream through a pen. No, I told Ryan the next morning, sliding him a fresh printout of my updated essay draft. He raised an eyebrow. No? I smiled. I'm writing a new last name. I was building a legacy. They were chasing a lineage. The difference seemed subtle to most, but to me it was the line between suffocation and breath. Our home sat at the edge of a sunlit hill, far enough from the city for quiet, close enough for connection. It had wide windows, creaky wooden floors, and shelves filled with stories. Some borrowed, some mine. 3 years into our marriage, Ryan still brewed his coffee like it was sacred, humming under his breath as he moved through the kitchen. Lena had her own room upstairs, filled with half-finished sketches and print proofs. She never fully unpacked, always drifting between here and her studio downtown, but this was her root system now. On a Tuesday morning in May, I held the test in my hands. Positive. I hadn't cried. I hadn't screamed. I'd just stood still for 10 minutes, staring at those 2 pink lines like they were someone else's story. Ryan came home early, saw my face, and froze mid-step. Is it? I nodded. He dropped his bag and wrapped me in his arms, laughing like the world just unfolded its arms too. A baby. He whispered into my hair. We're having a baby. Later that night, Lena brought over a cake she'd painted herself. Watercolor, frosting swirls, and soft pastel hues. We didn't have a big party. Just a dinner in the garden, fairy lights swaying gently, the scent of basil and rosemary drifting from the herb pots. I can't believe you're going to be a mom, Lena said, sipping her wine. Just promise me one thing. Anything, I replied. When you have a child, don't let anyone else name it. My fingers curled slightly around my glass. I mean it, she continued. Naming something, especially someone, is power, and they tried to take yours before you even knew what it was. I nodded, her words echoing in a part of me that had never fully healed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was silent, except for the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional creak of floorboards shifting. I drifted into a dream. In it, I was back in my childhood home. Not the real one, but something older, darker. The walls pulsed with shadows. I stood in a nursery, empty except for a crib draped in white netting. My father appeared, clipboard in hand. We've registered the baby already, he said. Morgan, of course, it's tradition. My mother stepped forward, holding out a silver rattle. You want them to be accepted, don't you? You want them to belong? Brandon's voice echoed from behind me. A name is just a name, Hailey. Don't make this dramatic. I looked down. My arms were empty. The crib was gone. No, I said, stepping back. No. I turned, running through hallways that kept stretching, walls closing in. The only door that opened led to a hospital room, blindingly white. A nurse handed me a form. Please confirm. Surname Morgan? No, I shouted, hands trembling. No, it's not. And then I woke up. The room was dark, my body slick with sweat. I lay still, heart pounding like a war drum. Then I reached for my stomach, hands wrapping protectively around the tiny, growing pulse of new life. Ryan stirred beside me, murmuring something incoherent, but I didn't respond. I stared at the ceiling, the dream lingering like smoke. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. No one else will have that right. And with that, something shifted inside me. Not fear, but resolve. This child would not inherit silence. They would inherit story. He knocked like we were still siblings, like nothing had happened. The sound echoed through the hallway, 3 deliberate taps, not too soft, not too firm. It was the kind of knock that assumed welcome, that leaned on shared history as if that were still currency. Rain slid down the windows in gray ribbons. I had been folding tiny baby clothes, savoring the softness of cotton, when I heard it. Ryan glanced at me from across the room, one eyebrow raised, already rising from the couch. But something in me already knew. I opened the door before Ryan could. Brandon stood there. Older now. Not aged, but worn. Creased in all the wrong places. His once perfect hair was overgrown and damp, his tailored arrogance now sagging in a jacket 2 seasons too old. He still had that half smile, the one that used to charm teachers and crushes alike. "Hailey," he said like it meant something. I didn't move. Rain misted behind him. The world grayed out like the past bleeding into the present. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside without speaking. Ryan stayed in the corner, arms crossed, saying nothing. He didn't need to. Brandon stood just inside the threshold, dripping, looking around like our house was a foreign country. "I need help," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "Only you can save me." I blinked slowly. That's quite a thing to say after a decade of silence. "I know," he said too quickly. I I messed up, Hailey. I know that. You were always the smart one. The quiet one, but smart. You remember how things were? Dad? The pressure, everything. I didn't have a choice." "You always had choices," I replied. He ignored that. "My ex-wife took everything. Said I was emotionally abusive, manipulative. I mean, it's her word against mine, right? But no one listens to men anymore. Not when women cry loud enough." Ryan shifted beside the bookshelf. Brandon's eyes darted toward him but returned to me. "Then Mom and Dad," he gave a bitter laugh. "They cut me off. Said I disgraced the name. Me, their golden boy." I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" He inhaled deeply. "Now I'm nothing. No job, no house, no money. And if I lose the Morgan legacy?" I tilted my head. "You came here for the name?" Brandon straightened. "No, not like that. I mean, kind of. Look, you're having a kid. Congratulations, by the way. But if you gave them the Morgan name, just the name, then everything would fall into place. Mom and Dad would soften. The property, the inheritance, it could all come back through your child." "Through my child?" I repeated. He took a step forward. "It's not just about me. It's about preserving the family. They'd rewrite the will. You'd be in it. Your baby would be the heir. Everything they denied you, they'd give now, through your child." I stared at him. "You really think that's what I want?" "You deserve it," he exclaimed. "All the things they didn't give you. They owe it to you now. I'm just helping you get it. We both win." I looked down at my hands. They were steady, calm. Lena's voice floated up from memory. "People only find you when they need something." "Brandon," I said quietly, "do you know the first thing I bought after moving out?" He frowned. "What?" "A blank journal. And I wrote a name. Not yours, not theirs, just mine." He didn't understand. I didn't expect him to. "Think about it," he said, desperation creeping back in. "It's one word, on a form, and you get everything. Don't be proud. Be practical." My heart beat slower, clearer. "I don't need the family property," I said, my voice steady. "I need freedom from it." Brandon wasn't here to make amends. He was here to bargain. He chose a neutral place. Too neutral. The coffee shop sat at the corner of a strip mall, full of white walls and glass reflections. He had picked a table by the window, a carefully chosen seat with full view of the room. To anyone watching, we were just two siblings catching up over coffee. He stood when I arrived, offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look well," he said. I sat down without replying. "Thank you for meeting me again," he added, voice polite, the way someone speaks when there's something to sell. "I assume this isn't about the baby anymore?" I said. Brandon laughed lightly. "Not really, but it's all connected." He leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you." I stayed quiet. "I'm launching a new startup," he said, like it was a script. "Media adjacent, creative consultancy, tapping into new voices. And I thought, What better way to bring it attention than your name? You're a published author. You've built something real. People trust you. I tilted my head. You want to use my name as branding? No, no, of course not. He backtracked quickly. I want you to be part of it. Equity. Creative freedom. Your own division, even. But it needs to happen fast. I already have potential investors lined up. We just need your signature on some initial paperwork. And your name wouldn't be on it? He hesitated. That's flexible. I stirred my coffee slowly. What does it actually do? It's conceptual. But that's the trend right now. We don't need full execution yet. Just the image. His smile was wide, practiced. I almost pitied him. Almost. A soft chime at the door. A woman in her 30s walked in. Short brown hair, blazer too crisp for casual coffee. She froze when she saw our table. Her eyes narrowed on Brandon. He flinched. She walked right past us to the counter but glanced again, this time directly at me. I know you, she said quietly after ordering. You're Hailey Morgan, right? Author? I nodded slowly. I used to work for your brother. Brandon's smile faltered. Caroline, this isn't the time. She ignored him. You might want to ask about the nonprofit grant he pocketed last year, or the development fund that somehow disappeared into a marketing expense. He's under review, but it's slow. He's slippery. My chest tightened. Brandon stood quickly. That's slander, Caroline. She looked at me. Just check. It's all public. Or will be. She left without another word. Brandon sat down again, jaw clenched. That was personal. She's bitter. She wanted to be CFO. I pulled out my phone. Say it again? He narrowed his eyes. Say what? That she's lying. That none of it happened. He stared. Are you recording me? I am now. The words between us went still. He leaned forward, voice cold. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I'm making a record. I ended the recording, slipped my phone into my coat. He sat back, chest rising in restrained fury. When I reached home, I put the phone into a locked drawer. An hour later, my phone buzzed. One new message. Brandon, you picked the wrong side. The people who hurt you and share your DNA? That's the cruelest kind of betrayal. The invitation arrived in the form of a quiet nudge. Lena, never one for dramatic gestures, simply left a folded card on Hailey's kitchen counter during one of their regular Tuesday dinners. Just think about it, she said, over the rim of her tea. Sometimes seeing it again helps let it go. Hailey turned the card over in her fingers later that night. Embossed lettering, the Morgan family crest, and a list of guests she hadn't spoken to in years. A family reunion, masquerading as a retirement party for her uncle. But she knew better. It was a gathering of names, of expectations, of unspoken hierarchies. And Brandon would be there. She didn't RSVP. She just showed up. The venue was a lakefront lodge, all old wood and glass, dressed up in blue and gold bunting. A live quartet played near the entrance. The scent of pine and expensive perfume hung in the air like a veil. Hailey stood at the edge of the walkway for a moment, her hand resting on the curve of her belly, her son kicking faintly inside as if sensing her nerves. Ryan had offered to come. Twice. She'd said no. This was a reckoning she needed to face without a witness. Inside, she walked past old faces wearing new expressions. Surprise, discomfort, barely concealed gossip. No one had seen her in 5 years. Not since the wedding she hadn't invited her parents to. Not since the book tour that bypassed her hometown entirely. She spotted them at the center table. Her parents, seated like monarchs with Brandon on one side. He was dressed sharply, but the sharpness no longer fit. His smile looked too wide. His eyes flicked around constantly, searching for approval. He was still trying to win something that had already crumbled. Lena met her at the drinks table, offering a glass of sparkling water. You're here. I am, Hailey said, not touching the glass. You don't have to stay long, but I thought maybe saying it out loud would set you free. Across the room, Brandon saw her and stood abruptly. Hailey! Look who decided to grace us with her presence. His voice cut across the room, pulling eyes toward them. Hailey straightened her spine, chin lifted. Hello, Brandon. He crossed the floor with too much enthusiasm, arms open like they were children again. She didn't step forward. I'm so glad you came, he said. Mom and Dad will be thrilled. This could be good. A real turning point. For what? She asked flatly. A reunion, he said, eyes darting to their parents who were watching now with mixed caution and calculation. Come say hi. She followed him back to the table, every step heavy with history. Hailey, her mother said, nodding once. It's been a while. You didn't call when I published my second book, Hailey replied. I didn't read it, her mother said simply. We heard it was quite personal. It was, Hailey said. It sold out its first run. Her father stirred his drink. Some things are best left in the family, not broadcast to strangers. I disagree. Brandon cut in, his tone gentle. Hey, let's not make this about old wounds. We're all here now. That's something, right? You're the one who made it about wounds, Hailey said, turning to him. You and your lies, your theft, your fake apologies. Their mother pursed her lips. If you had understood Brandon better, things wouldn't have come to this. The air stilled. Somewhere across the room, the string quartet hit a discordant note. Hailey stared at her mother for a long moment. That's what you think? That I should have tolerated being erased because it made him feel taller? No one erased you, her father said. You chose to disappear. I chose peace, she said. You chose Brandon. Always have. Even when he stole, even when he lied, even when he failed. A few guests nearby were pretending not to listen. One woman actually turned her back but kept visibly leaning in. I didn't come here to fight, Hailey continued. I came here to look at all of you, to see who you've become, and to decide whether I want any of it near my son. Her voice had risen slightly, enough to quiet the tables within earshot. I'm not coming back, she said. I just came to see for the last time who I want my son to be like. Her mother rose abruptly, color rising in her face. Then don't blame me when Brandon leaves forever. There was a pause, and then Hailey's quiet answer. That's your choice. Not mine. No one moved. Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came out. Hailey turned, her steps steady, measured. Lena silently joined her, matching pace. They walked out into the fresh night air, the lake shimmering beyond the trees. Inside, the party continued, but something about it had cracked. The Morgan name had just lost its heirloom shine, and Hailey, for the first time, felt utterly unburdened. I thought the worst was behind me. But Brandon always saved the worst for last. The hall was hushed, a dignified kind of quiet that only old buildings and important ceremonies could create. My heels echoed on the polished wooden floor as I walked toward the lectern, the weight of the years pressing softly against my back. This was supposed to be the day I returned triumphant. No longer the quiet, unwanted girl from Pennsylvania, but Hailey Rivers, debut author, invited back to speak at the university that had once cradled my earliest ambitions. Ryan adjusted my microphone while the event coordinator whispered the final cues. A large poster of my book stood to the left of the stage, proud and shimmering, as though announcing that I had finally made it. I scanned the first row. Professors, students, my publisher's editor, and Lena grinning with quiet fire in her eyes. I smiled back, grounded by her presence. Then I saw him, Brandon. He was sitting in the third row, arms folded, eyes gleaming like a predator who knew exactly where the rabbit would run. His suit was cheap and ill-fitted, but he wore it like armor. I felt my stomach turn, but I said nothing. Not today. He didn't have the power to ruin today. Or so I thought. As I began my speech, Part personal, part reflective, I saw a rustle near the back. A man in a blazer approached the stage and whispered something into my editor's ear. Her face stiffened and she stood up abruptly. Then 2 more students entered with stacks of stapled papers, fanning out like messengers on a battlefield. Each audience member was handed a copy, eyebrows raising as they read. Confused murmurs grew into sharp whispers. I faltered mid-sentence, my voice snagging like thread on thorns. "What's going on?" I asked softly, glancing at the editor. She walked up to the microphone, her face pale. "We regret to inform you that there's been a formal complaint submitted to the publisher this morning regarding the authenticity of Hailey Rivers's manuscript." The room turned electric. A journalist raised his hand. "Is it true that the manuscript plagiarizes a high school essay written by her brother, Brandon Morgan?" I froze. Brandon stood now, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "I never wanted to do this," he said, projecting just enough to be heard. "But it's important people know the truth. My sister has been writing versions of my work for years. I tried to settle this privately." Ryan bolted from his seat, approaching him. "That's a lie and you know it." "Ryan," I said quietly, "don't." The whispers turned into ripples, words like fraud, investigation, retraction, all crashing against my skin like hailstones. I looked around, felt the walls closing in, the air tightening. My breath caught. For a moment, it felt like I was 5 again, hearing my father say I shouldn't have been kept. The event was cut short. The editor spoke into a mic that buzzed with static. "Until the matter is resolved, the publisher will halt the book release and all related promotions." I stumbled backstage, tears clinging to my lashes but not falling. Ryan followed me, his hand hovering but not daring to touch. I sat on a cold bench, my entire body numb. "He planned this," I whispered. "He planned every second." Ryan knelt in front of me. "Then we'll fight back. You're not alone, Hailey. Not anymore." But my voice trembled. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe thinking I could ever be free of them was naive. Maybe legacy really is just lineage in disguise. "No," he said. "You've come too far. You've built something he couldn't touch. He's just trying to pull you back." But the seed of doubt had already rooted. What if I wasn't real? What if my voice was never mine to begin with? Hours later, alone in our study, I opened my laptop. I didn't check the news, the emails, or the message from my editor. I bypassed everything and opened a folder buried deep under layers of renamed files. Inside, I found it. The scanned pages of my childhood diary, each one yellowed by time but preserved like fossilized truth. She opens her laptop and finds her childhood diary. He thought he could rewrite my past, but I've kept every page. The house was silent, cloaked in that kind of darkness that only visits when the world feels heavy. Ryan had long since gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my study, surrounded by old notebooks, folders, and yellowing pieces of lined paper. The faint hum of my laptop kept me grounded as I sifted through memory. The scent of ink and dust brought me back to nights in that cold room in Pennsylvania. Grandma had once whispered to me, "The most honest memories are the ones people bury." Now I understood. In hiding, I had preserved my truth. My fingers trembled slightly as I flipped through a worn blue diary. Near the middle, pressed between 2 pages, was a clipping from 2009. A short poem, haunting, raw, the words of a girl aching to be seen. I remembered every line because I had written it. But the byline bore a familiar sting. Brandon Morgan. I sat in silence for several minutes. My 13-year-old handwriting framed the page, circled and noted in the margins. He had submitted it, taken credit, and when it was published in the local teen section of the paper, he told everyone at school how brilliant he was. I had said nothing. I was used to being quiet. But I wasn't 13 anymore. I scanned the clipping and the diary page, then opened my email. There was one teacher who might remember, Mr. Callahan. He had been the only one who ever noticed I sat in the back and rarely spoke, but never missed an assignment. Subject: Old memory. Need your help. Dear Mr. Callahan, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing about a piece that was published back in 2009 in the County Teen column. The poem titled Glass Girl. Do you recall it? I believe my brother submitted it under his name, though it was my work. I'm in a difficult situation now and could really use your memory. Warm regards, Hailey Morgan, now Hailey Ray. I hesitated before hitting send, but the fire in my chest urged me on. Minutes later, I added the scan page to a folder titled Truth. Ryan appeared in the doorway. He looked half asleep, but alert the moment he saw the papers around me. Another ghost? He asked. Brandon's plagiarism, from when we were kids, I said. He sat beside me, reading over the poem, then my diary, then the email. Let's build a timeline, he said. Evidence, sequence, intent. The works together, we spent hours categorizing old notes, emails, and classwork. I found a printed syllabus from a poetry elective I had taken with my name listed under Top Contributions. Brandon hadn't even attended that year. Ryan pulled articles, school newsletters, even a yearbook quote that hinted at, my sister's words inspire me. Careless, Ryan said with a faint grin. Around 3 a.m., a new email pinged. Subject, Glass Girl poem. Hailey, of course I remember. You handed that in for a creative writing assignment. I remember because I read it aloud to the class and had to stop halfway through. It was yours. I'll write a statement if needed. Sincerely, Mr. Callahan. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Then I compiled everything. Labeled, sorted, cross-checked with publication dates. The PDF ended up nearly 30 pages. At the end, I wrote, this isn't just evidence. This is my history. I sent it to my publisher with a short note. Dear Ms. Jenkins, please find attached the timeline and documentation regarding the recent accusation. I'm prepared to answer further questions, but believe this will speak for itself. Warmly, Hailey Ray. I waited. The reply came at 4:11 a.m. Subject, evidence submission. Hailey, thank you. The truth will be revealed at the press conference on Friday. I stared at the screen, the words glowing like a promise. I hadn't just defended myself. I had reclaimed what was mine. I didn't walk into the press conference to clear my name. I walked in to end the lies. The downtown hotel ballroom was packed tighter than I expected. Cameras clicked in staccato bursts as I stepped onto the stage, each flash a reminder that every breath I took was now public record. My palms didn't sweat. My heart didn't race. There was only a cold clarity, like the air before a storm. The publisher's editor gave me a solemn nod, stepping aside to let me speak. I looked over the podium, past the sea of blinking red lights and expectant faces, and found Lena seated in the back row. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. Just a nod, one of steel and solidarity. Thank you for being here, I began, my voice even. I know recent allegations have stirred doubt around the authenticity of my work. I'm here to respond, not just for myself, but for every silenced voice whose truth was twisted into someone else's success. A collective hush blanketed the room. I opened my laptop and clicked play. The first slide appeared on the large screen. A timeline, dates, file names, snippets of handwriting, photos of the original notebook pages. Next slide, a scan of the 2009 poem published in a local youth column, my name typed at the bottom, but signed by Brandon. The same handwriting from my journal, now immortalized in ink without my consent. The crowd stirred. I continued. This is an image of my childhood diary, started when I was 5. In it, I recorded ideas, essays, even poems. This entry was dated March 2009. Here's the same piece, submitted 3 weeks later by Brandon, without my knowledge, to a publication in our town. Another slide, a screenshot of an email. And this, I said, is from my former high school English teacher, confirming that Brandon often copied from my notebooks before submitting to competitions. A buzz rippled through the press row. For years, I swallowed silence because I was told family matters should stay inside the house. But some things rot when hidden. So here they are, aired out finally. The editor gave me a slight signal. It was time. I nodded. I'll also play a recording. In 2015, when I announced I was publishing under a different name, I received a voicemail. The audio played through the room's speakers. My mother's voice, harsh, unfiltered, unmistakable, filled the space. You're a disgrace to this family. How dare you parade that filth under our name? You should have never been born a Morgan. A stunned silence. Then Lena stood. Calm, clear, measured. I recorded that call. I was on speakerphone with Hailey when it came in. I submitted a notarized statement this morning to confirm its authenticity. A murmur, then voices rising from the crowd. Reporters exchanging glances, scribbling furiously. From the front row, a journalist stood. Ms. Morgan, he began, then paused. Or should I say, Ms. Rivers, do you plan to take back the Morgan name now that your reputation is restored? I didn't hesitate. I never lost my name, I said. I simply reclaimed it. The applause started slow, unsure. Then it surged. But before the room could settle into resolution, the editor walked over and handed me a sealed envelope. He whispered, "This came in 10 minutes ago. Couriered." I opened it. Inside, a formal notice from the Morgan family's legal representative. My eyes scanned the top line. Intent to file, defamation and character damage suit. Brandon Morgan and Associates. The air around me seemed to thin, but I held my breath and read it to the end. The Morgan family sent a lawyer to sue Hailey for defamation. They called it a family gathering. It felt more like a firing squad. The Morgan mansion hadn't changed. The same velvet drapes clung to the windows like secrets. The same chandelier dripped crystal tears above the long, polished dining table. Only this time, Hailey walked in as a guest, not a daughter. The air was colder somehow, though it wasn't the temperature. It was the way the portrait stared from the walls, stern, disappointed men with the Morgan jawline and the Morgan pride. She was led to a seat near the end of the table. Her mother greeted her with a brittle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're so glad you came," she said, as if reading from a script. Hailey didn't respond. She didn't need to. Brandon sat 2 seats over, hands folded in forced serenity. He looked thinner, his shirt a touch too large, his cufflinks borrowed from a better time. He raised his glass in a weak toast. "To family," he murmured. A few relatives echoed him politely. Hailey did not raise her glass. The evening trudged forward. Small talk clattered like cutlery. Her mother leaned in with a theatrical softness. "We know you've been through a lot, dear. Fame has its stress. But surely you must understand that family should be your anchor." Hailey met her gaze. "Anchors drown you if you don't cut the rope." A relative choked on his wine. Her mother's smile cracked. "You always were dramatic." Brandon took his cue. "Look, Hailey, I know I made mistakes. We all did. But this..." He motioned around the table. "This is who we are, and we can still make it work. You could name the baby after me even, Brandon Jr. It could be a fresh start." Hailey stared at him. "A fresh start," she repeated, like testing the taste of poison. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a single folded document. She laid it flat on the table, turning it so her father could read it. A birth certificate. Not yet official. She was only months away. But the name was typed clearly in bold. Surname, Reyes. Her mother's face went still. "What is this?" "My child's name," Hailey said simply. "He won't carry the name of a man who never wanted me, or a brother who tried to destroy me." Her father's fork scraped harshly against the plate. "Reyes? That's not even a Morgan name." "It's my mother's maiden name," Hailey said, her voice steady. "The part of my bloodline that didn't poison me." The table went quiet. "Don't be ridiculous," her mother snapped. Names matter, legacies matter. I agree, Hailey said. That's why I'm ending yours. Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked toward their father, perhaps expecting him to intervene. He did. Her father slammed a hand on the table, the wine glasses jumping. Then from now on, we are done, he roared. You are no longer my daughter. Hailey didn't flinch. Instead, she stood up slowly, took one last look around the table, at the generations of silence, of tradition, of shadows, and whispered, Good. Then she walked out, the echoes of her heels louder than any apology they never gave. When a legacy is built on silence and shame, one voice is all it takes to bring it down. It started with whispers on social media, screenshots of Hailey's timeline file, a video snippet from the press conference, and a blurry photo of Lena standing beside her with quiet defiance. The post was captioned simply, Truth takes its time, but it never forgets its path. It had over 200,000 shares in less than 24 hours. The backlash wasn't loud at first. A few angry emails to the publisher, some passive-aggressive comments from old investors on Brandon's LinkedIn posts. But then the national morning shows picked it up. One anchor, sitting before a glowing image of Hailey's face, said, In a time when so many families hide their failures behind polished photos, one woman stepped into the light with nothing but her voice and her proof. Brandon watched the segment from a rented condo in Los Angeles, the walls empty, his phone buzzing with calls he didn't answer. He looked smaller now. The once confident golden boy was now a man hunched over a glass of whiskey at 11 in the morning. Emails kept flooding in. Investors freezing funds, collaborators backing out. A short note from his main sponsor read, Your personal brand no longer aligns with our company's values. Across the country, Mr. Morgan faced a different reckoning. In the boardroom of Morgan and Eastman Holdings, the shareholders sat stiffer than usual. One of them, a silver-haired man who had once toasted to Mr. Morgan's leadership, leaned forward and tapped a printed article on the table. Nepotism we can tolerate. Scandal we cannot. Mr. Morgan tried to respond with his usual poise, but the edge in his voice cracked through. This is a family matter. It has nothing to do with company performance. Another shareholder replied coolly, On the contrary, public image is performance now. You taught us that. The vote was swift. He wasn't removed, not yet. But the motion for resignation was on the agenda for the next quarter. A silent countdown had begun. Meanwhile, Nicole made her first and final appearance. She sent a letter, not to the Morgans, but to Brandon directly. It was brief and painfully elegant. I once thought your name could open every door, but I have learned to build doors myself. I don't need your legacy to live a life of value. Goodbye, Brandon. Brandon read it twice, then 3 times. He didn't cry, just poured another drink. That evening, a clip from a popular late-night show went viral. The host, known for her cutting commentary, held up a photo of Hailey and said, Some inherit money. Some inherit land. But dignity, that's something you build yourself. And in that case, Hailey Reyes, is the only rightful heir. It stung deeper than any formal statement. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Brandon stared at the screen until it went black. Then he stumbled into the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, he didn't see the star student or the favorite son. Just a man left behind by his own lies. He grabbed his phone. The screen lit up. He scrolled past headlines, past Nicole's unread message, until he opened Hailey's contact. No hesitation. He typed, You ruined my whole life. And hit send. I wasn't rebuilding to prove them wrong. I was building to become whole. The town of Shellwood didn't know my name, and I liked it that way. Nestled along the cliffs of Northern California, its mornings smelled of salt and rosemary, and the wind hummed through the trees like it had something gentle to say. The house we rented had a cracked porch and sunburned shutters, but it faced the sea, and that was enough. Spring came early. Wildflowers curled along the fence of the old schoolhouse we bought for $1 and a dream. The paint peeled in places, but the beams were strong, and Ryan said that's all that mattered. We called it New Roots. There was no ribbon cutting, no press, no speeches, just 3 women who arrived the day we unlocked the doors. One of them was carrying a child on her hip, and the other 2 walked like they weren't used to being seen. They sat in silence at first. Then, slowly, one picked up a book. Another asked about classes. The third whispered, "Can I come again tomorrow?" That was enough. At night, I'd sit by the wide front window and read from the diary I'd kept since childhood. Some entries made me laugh. Some still burned. But every page reminded me of the girl I had been, and the woman I promised her I'd become. Elias was born on a Thursday. He came into the world with a tiny scream and wide, curious eyes. I held him close, kissed his forehead, and whispered his name. Elias Reyes. Ryan cried harder than the baby. I didn't. I felt quiet, like a new chapter had finally opened, one I had waited my whole life to write. The next morning, while Elias slept, an email popped up in my inbox. It was from Nicole. "Hi, Hailey. I've been following the work you're doing in Shellwood. I think it's beautiful. I'd like to donate a set of children's books. I hope they find the hands that need them." No signature. Just that. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I bookmarked the email. Later that week, the library was fuller. Word had spread. There were women from different towns, some who had left broken homes, some who had no homes at all. We made tea in the back room. A few volunteers read to the kids. Ryan built a shelf shaped like a tree. That afternoon, as the light poured through the window in golden streaks, I sat in the reading circle and opened my old diary. The final page had a smear of ink and the date. August 12th, 2009. I cleared my throat and read aloud. "I want someone to call me Mom one day. Not by blood, but by faith." Silence followed. A few eyes brimmed. One child, maybe 5 years old, reached over and touched my hand. "Can I come again tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes." I smiled, voice thick. "Anytime." That evening, when the library emptied and the sea wind rustled through the trees, I stood before the photo of my grandmother that hung by the door. Her eyes sparkled like they always had. Fierce, knowing, kind. I looked straight into them. I did it. I used to chase their approval. Now I walk freely, with no name to borrow. The New Roots Library stood tall under the soft sun of spring, its doors open wide to a stream of children with scraped knees, mothers with tired eyes, and elders who had waited too long to be heard. On the sign hanging above the door, the paint had begun to fade from the salt air, but the words were still legible. A place where stories begin again. Hailey stood near the front, a stack of books in her arms, watching as Ryan arranged chairs in a neat arc. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor with 2 young girls, reading aloud from a picture book about a lion who found his roar. It had been 1 year since the press conference. 1 year since she'd stood in front of the world and said, "I never lost my name." Today wasn't about Morgan. It wasn't even about Hailey. It was about what came after. She walked to the front as the room quieted. A few reporters were there, not from national outlets, but from local papers. They didn't ask about lawsuits or legacies. They asked about library cards. Hailey smiled. "This isn't a place of revenge," she said, voice calm and steady. "It's a place where stories begin again, and no one needs permission to be seen." The room clapped. A few women wiped tears. One mother squeezed her child's hand tighter. Later that afternoon, Hailey and Ryan sat at the long wooden table near the back window, watching their son Elias scribble shapes in his notebook. The boy had Ryan's thoughtful brow and Hailey's determined chin. He held up the page. "Mommy, look, that's my name." She leaned in, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Yes, baby, that's Elias. You wrote it perfectly." He tilted his head. "But why don't I have Grandpa's name?" The question landed softly, but not without weight. Hailey looked out the window for a moment. the sea was visible through the trees, blue and endless. Then she turned back to her son, cupping his cheek. "Because you have yours," she said gently, "and that's enough." Elias nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing suns and waves beside his name. Ryan reached over and took Hailey's hand under the table. No words passed between them, but the grip said, "We're doing this right." As the day slowed and the last visitors left, Hailey stayed behind to clean. She gathered leftover paper cups, stacked books, and swept the entryway. In the mailbox out front, among donation flyers and book requests, was a plain white envelope with no return address. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was tight, angular, unmistakable. "If you ever want to talk, I'll listen." That was all. No greeting, no apology, no signature. Just the weight of everything unsaid. She stared at it for a long time. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not with anger, not with grief, but with something she couldn't quite name. The ache of a wound that had already closed, but still itched when it rained. Then, without a word, she walked back into the library and slipped the letter between the pages of her old diary. The one from 2009, the one that had once said, "I want someone to call me Mom one day, not by blood, but by faith." She smiled, put the letter in the book, did not reply, but did not tear it up either. Some stories aren't just about revenge. They're about reclaiming what was buried under silence. When a woman who was once ignored chooses to speak, even dynasties built on arrogance begin to crack. Justice, though delayed, arrived not with fury but with truth, and that made it undeniable. Like a forgotten name carved back into stone, her dignity didn't just survive, it stood. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you, and comment 1 if you resonate with Hailey's journey, or 2 if you think her battle isn't over yet.